Okay, Bruchim Habayim. Thank you for joining me tonight, everybody, for Parashat Hashavua, Parashat Shemini. Um, it's an honor and privilege to learn with you guys tonight. We'd like to dedicate tonight's learning for the completed speedy recovery of Menachem ben Khurshid, also for Yaakov Yisrael ben Giti, and also for Nejat Lamet Avus, David ben Nahid Sarah, Malkiel ben Soraya, and Kol Cholei Yisrael. Hashem should send them all a speedy recovery. Everybody, if you have any names you'd like to add for Refuah Shlema, please, you could let me know now. We'll announce them that they should have a speedy recovery. It's part of our learning. We always learn for the Cholei Yisrael. So if you have any names, please, now's the time. Anybody? Okay, no problem. Hashem, only good news for all of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so we begin the Parashat Shemini, Vayhi Bayom Hashmini. As Chazal tell us, when you see the word Vayhi, unfortunately, you know that means trouble. You know that means that something bad is going to happen. And over here, Shmini obviously means the 8th day. The question is, 8th day of what? So Rashi tells us, Shmini la Miluim, Hu Rosh Chodesh Nisan. This is talking about the 8th day of the Miluim, which means that this is the first day of the month of Nisan. This is the day that the Mishkan was finally going to be used for the first time. For the previous 7 days, those days were called Shivat Yimei HaMiluim, the 7 days of the Miluim, which means the 7 days of inauguration. And that's when Aaron and his sons were being inaugurated as Kohanim. And now over here, it's Vayhi Bayom Hashmini. It's the 8th day that we're about to talk about what we are about to talk about. And Aaron has to go ahead and Aaron has to offer up offerings to atone for himself and for his family. And what's going to take place is, sadly, the famous story of Nadav and Avihu that are so excited to go ahead and to offer up an offering for the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that sadly they did not wait for the instruction to do so, and then they were killed because they offered up a foreign offering that they were not supposed to do. Foreign fire, Ish Zara. Of course, we know that to be the Ketoret. So that's going to take place in this week's parasha, and that's why the first word of the parasha is Vayhi. And the Gemara tells us, and Midrash tells us in a bunch of places, that the word Vayhi means that something very tragic and unfortunate is going to take place, and that is the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu. Now, the first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, if this is really the first day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of Nisan, which is Rosh Chodesh, so then the 7 days of inauguration have already been completed, and now this is day 1. Why is it calling it Yom Hashmini, the 8th day? So there's an interesting discussion that the Maharal of Prague has, and it's an idea that I'm sure many of you have heard, but it's the idea that the number 8 represents above nature. The Maharal talks about this, the idea that 7 is a number that represents nature, 7 days of the week, right? 8 represents above nature, right? The above supernatural. And over here, the concept is that Hashem wanted the Mishkan to start off with the number 8. Hashem wanted it to be that the Mishkan starts off with the number 8 because that is a good sign, supernatural. Like, for example, it's brought down that when when the Jewish people sang Az Yashir, right, at this great miracle, Hashem made the sea split into 12 different parts, and the Jews were able to come back out on the same side, but they were able to escape the Egyptians who came in and were drowned in the water. So the first word is Az Yashir. Then Moshe sang. So Az, as you know, is Aleph and Zayin. Aleph is 1, Zayin is 7. So Az is 7 plus 1 is 8. So the number 8 is there because, again, something that was above nature happened. And what exactly brought about the splitting of the sea? As you know, there was a moment there where the Jewish people didn't see any miracle happening, and they were stuck between the Egyptians and the sea, and it wasn't a good situation for them. So the reason for that was because the sea said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not opening up for them. Halalu ovdei avodah zarah, the Egyptians are idol worshippers, and very sadly, as you know, the Jews in Egypt reached almost the 50th gate of impurity. Halalu ovdei avodah zarah. The sar of the water, the ministering angel of the ocean said to Hashem, these guys, these Jewish people, they also worship idols. So what merit do they have that I should split for them? And at that point, as we say in Hallel, Hayam Ra'a Vayanos, the nation saw Vayanos. What did the nation? What the not the Am? Hayam, the sea saw Vayanos. The Vayanos means, and it ran away. What did it see? It saw Yosef. It saw the bones of Yosef that were being brought over to the ocean, and it saw that Yosef HaTzadik had a situation where he was so tempted to do something wrong, but then he literally ran away, and he ran from the Averah that he was doing, or not that he was doing, but he was close to doing. He ran away from it, and because of that zechut, so the sea saw his bones, and the sea itself said, I'm running away too, meaning that I'm going to split for them in the zechut of that person. So what we find over here is the following idea, that in order for a miracle to happen, a person himself has to make a miracle first, which means it's a very difficult challenge for somebody who's 18 years old to go ahead and to be tempted with one of the most beautiful women to ever live, who's coming on to him and trying to seduce him again and again, day after day, and he still holds strong to his morality and still resists the temptation time after time. That itself is an action that is almost supernatural, because a person at a certain point, even if he does have a high moral standard, he does give in, he does break, he does collapse, he does fail. That's what's normal. That's what's usual. Even if you do want to be on a higher moral ground than others, you do want to do what's right in the eyes of Hashem, but at a certain point you break. And instead of that happening to Yosef, even at the last moment where he was inches away literally from doing the Averah, he was able to withhold himself, and he was able to run and say that I can't do this. I can't. It's forbidden for me to do this. And he ran away. So he himself did something superhuman. He did something supernatural. So Hashem says, you do something supernatural, you do something superhuman, you go above nature, above your own personal nature. So I will make a miracle for you because you did it yourself. In other words, when you make a miracle yourself, so Hashem says, in response, I will make a miracle for you too. And that's the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I can split the sea in the zechut of Yosef. That's why the two words are the same. Vayanos, Vayanos. Hayam Ra'a Vayanos, which means the sea saw. What did the sea saw? Vayanos, that he ran away, that Yosef ran away. That's why the word in Hallel and the word in the Torah are the same, because it's trying to say that that was the connection, that the zechut of Yosef running away made the sea run away. So that's the idea. When you have something that is miraculous like that, when you do something that is miraculous like that, right, you push yourself to a point where it's uncomfortable for you, where it's not what you would naturally want to do, but you're doing it because you know this is the will of Hashem, and in spite of the fact that naturally this is not what would be the natural course of action, right? You are pushing yourself to stay on target, on track, and you're going above your nature. So Hashem says in return, I will go above nature for you as well. Let's say a person, for example, he comes to the class one night a week. He goes one night, Baruch Hashem, that's one, but one night is beautiful, but it's something naturally a person would like to go, for example, one night. That's a good thing. It's almost a, kind of very, very regular type of a thing to do. But a person pushes himself, he goes 3-4 nights a week. Ooh, that is pushing himself. That is already maybe in the category of unnatural. One night we can understand, it's pretty usual, let's say. But 2-3 nights to go learn Gemara every night of the weeknights, that's a big deal, right? That's pushing himself beyond his natural tendencies. So that's going to cause miracles to happen for him, right? That's the idea. A person goes beyond his nature. He has to make what's called a ra'ash in Shemaim. He has to do something that stirs the pot of the heavens. And in Shemaim, they're looking at this guy and they're going, wow, this guy is a special guy. Look at what he did. Look at what he accomplished. That's the idea. We want to storm the heavens with our actions. I once was speaking to somebody that told me that a particular fellow stole a lot of money from him, and unfortunately this happens a lot, and I've heard from multiple people many times that these things take place. And nevertheless, the fellow told me that he found it in his heart to forgive this person and to let go of whatever situation they had between them. That is something that is going to create a ra'ash, a storm in the heavens. Because here's a person who stole money from you, he took from you what doesn't belong to him, and you are now faced with a choice. Should I pursue him? Should I run after him? Should I try and make his life miserable? Should I put up a crazy fight? Should I do all of this? Or should I say, you know what, I'd rather just be at peace and I'd rather move on with life and I can forgive the guy for what he did? Again, I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do in every single case. Every case is different, but my point is that naturally speaking, a person would not choose the avenue of peace. Normally you stand up, you fight, you protect yourself, and you do what you have to do in order to right the wrong, right? But sometimes a person knows that that could mean decades of devastating, bitter battles, and a person could find himself being miserable for quite some time. And instead, this person chose to choose a path of peace, even to his own financial loss. That's not natural. That is work. You have to work on yourself to get to such a level where you realize I'd rather choose peace and harmony in my own soul, in my own community, in my own whatever it is, and then go after that instead, right? That creates a rash in Shamayim. Look at this guy. Look at this guy, how he was wronged, how he was tricked, how he was cheated, and instead of creating machloket, and instead of having a huge battle with this person, this guy is choosing to choose peace in his own life and harmony in his own community over whatever, I don't know how much money was involved over there. That's a very high level. And it says that such a person is kitzet hashemesh bigvurato. It's not a normal thing. So for such a person, Hashem makes miracles. That's the idea, because he goes out of his own nature. He rises above his own nature. So Hashem does above nature things for him too. That's one of the stories of one of the famous Rebbes, that he was very poor. I forgot which Rebbe it was. He was extremely poor. The only thing that was of value that he had that was worth a lot of money was a pair of tefillin from his grandfather. And his grandfather was a great Rebbe. And people were always offering him money for that tefillin. They said, we'll pay you so much money for it. We want it. It's so precious to us. And he said, listen, I have this from my grandfather. It's not for sale, etc. Until one Sukkot came by and he didn't have a set of lulav and etrog. And it was a very, very expensive thing to get. But then he came across one super beautiful, brilliant etrog, shining. And he said, this is a mitzvah that you can't pass up on. And he took his grandfather's tefillin, he sold it, he got the money, and with that money, he bought this beautiful set of lulav and etrog with this gorgeous etrog. And he was so happy. He came home, and his wife, again, for the longest time, is telling him, listen, you have this tefillin, sell it, bring home some money so that we can live together and we can have what we need, and then our family will have what we have. So she sees that he brings home this etrog, and she says to him, wow, that's a beautiful etrog. Where did you get the money to buy that? So he said, I sold my grandfather's tefillin and I bought it. She heard that and she couldn't believe her ears. After all this time, I'm asking you to spend the money to sell that tefillin so we have food for the house, so that we have the things that we need at home. And instead of doing that, this is what you do, right? She was so upset. She took the etrog from his hand and she threw it on the floor and she disqualified the etrog. Now, at this point, a normal person would lose it. He would say, what just happened? Not only now that I don't have my grandfather's tefillin, I don't even have the etrog that I spent all this money on. I don't even have my set for the holiday. A person would be livid at that point. But this Rebbe, he went above nature. And he said, listen, Not going to happen. He said, Yetzer Hara, I know what's going on. I get what's going on. You don't want me to have my set for the 4 species of Sukkot. But guess what? I know you're also trying to get me not to have my Shlom Bayit. I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to get angry because I want to keep my Shlom Bayit. So at least my Shlom Bayit I have. It's true I don't have a set anymore, but I do have my Shlom Bayit. So that's going above your own nature to do what is correct in the eyes of Hashem. And in this week's parasha, we see that again. As we just mentioned earlier, we have now the story with Aaron, how he lost his 2 sons. Very sadly, Nadav and Avihu died in this parasha. And when a person loses his 2 sons, it's a devastating thing. Devastating. It's terrible. It's tragedy. And not only that, but it says in the parasha that Moshe Rabbeinu tells Aaron, Hu asher diber Hashem bikrovai kadesh, right? Which means that Aaron is being told by Moshe, as Rashi tells us, I thought it was going to be either me or you. I knew somebody was going to pass away, but I thought it was going to be either me or you. I had no idea that it was them, because the fact that it was them means that they were on an even higher level than both you and me. So therefore, you see what kind of loss we're dealing with here. We're dealing with tremendous tzaddikim who died. It's a devastating moment. And Aharon is told at this point, being that this is day 1 of the Mishkan, this is not a time to cry. Now is not the time to cry. So Vayidom Aaron, Aaron stayed silent. He didn't cry. He just stayed silent. That's above nature. That is definitely above nature. That is something where a person goes beyond his nature and says, look, there's nothing more that he wants to do than to cry terrible tears of pain right now. But being that this is not the time, this is day 1 of the Mishkan, it's not happening. And he goes and does what he's supposed to do on this very holy day of the first day of the Mishkan, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And he kept on working. And not only did he keep on working, he was even able to keep the mindset of trying to understand what is correct to do, what is the proper way to serve Hashem in his present state, so that at a point where Moshe Rabbeinu asks Aaron, why didn't you eat the offering that you were supposed to eat? He was able to tell him, Moshe Rabbeinu, don't you know that I'm an onen at this point? I'm mourning for my 2 sons, meaning that a person in my situation is not supposed to eat at this time, right? So in other words, he was even still able to answer Moshe Rabbeinu back and keep the clarity of awareness of what's going on in his situation, to be able to say that what you had told me earlier to do was for that situation that I was in before my 2 sons died. But what you're telling me to do now, right, that doesn't apply anymore, because at this point, my 2 sons have passed on and I cannot eat the offering like you told me. So he was even at a point where he was still thinking about the goal, which is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that goal does not go away, even in the face of terrible personal loss, suffering, and tragedy. That's above nature. That's going above nature. And that's something that we can see over here, that the Mishkan was supposed to start on Yom HaShemini because of that idea that everything about the Mishkan and later with the Bet HaMikdash was all about being above nature. The reason being, as we've spoken about in the past, because the Mishkan was the place on planet Earth, and the Bet HaMikdash as well, when Shlomo Melech built it, those were the 2 places on the planet that were not cursed by the curse of Arura Adama Ba'avurecha, which means that Hashem told Adam that the land is cursed because of you. And therefore, since this land was like pre the sin of Adam and Chava, wherever the Mishkan was and wherever the Bet HaMikdash was, so that's why Hashem could be revealed in those locations, and all these miraculous things could take place over there. So that's the significance of Bayom HaShmini. And even though really this shouldn't be called the 8th day, it should be called the first day. But we call it the 8th day in order to give it that significance of, no, it's above nature. It's the higher spiritual level. And therefore, all of these miracles that are listed in Pirkei Avot, we don't have to go through all of them now, but the whole idea of the Mishkan was a very miraculous and holy place. Okay, so that's what we start off with. Now, In this parasha, there are a lot of very, very interesting comments that are made by the Mefarshim, and I'd like to share some of them with you. So first of all, over here in the parasha, we have a full listing of the laws of kosher, of what are kosher animals, what are not kosher animals, what are kosher fish and not kosher fish, and which animals bring about impurity when they die, and which animals do not bring about impurity. So we have a lot, Baruch Hashem, that we can talk about. Now, one comment that I saw from the Baal HaTurim is a very interesting comment, and that is the following. First of all, it's important to mention this before Pesach, like the Ben Ish Chai mentions in the halachot, where the Gemara in Masechet Makot tells us, based on the psukim and the parasha this week, that if a person eats a bug of the water, so the Gemara tells us that that is actually 4 sets of lashes. If a person eats hasheretz hashoretz ala aretz, which is also in this week's parasha, which means a land crawling bug, right? One of the creatures that crawl. So that's a set of 5 sets of lashes, each set being 39 lashes each. If it's a flying bug, that's 6 sets of lashes, the Gemara tells us. So it's a very serious thing. You'd ask yourself, what's worse, a person who eats a cockroach, God forbid, or a nice piece of pork, right? So obviously you'd say, well, pork is very, very bad. Well, 1 second. Pork is 1 set of lashes, but the cockroach is 5. And you'd never think like that. That's a very serious ordeal. And that's why the Ben Ish Chai said that this Chacham was walking by the courtyard of a particular family, and he saw this woman who was checking the lettuce for the night of the Seder, and she was checking it in a very haphazard way. She wasn't really looking at it, one by one. And he said to her, how many hairs do you have on your head? And she said, I don't know, I can't count. He said, well, that's how many lavim, negative commandments, the people who are going to eat at your seder are going to violate, because you're not checking for bugs properly. So that is a very important thing to talk about. That's this week's parasha. It comes from this week's parasha, the isur to eat these things. So now what I wanted to point out over here is a very interesting comment from the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim says that there isn't even one single sheretz that the Torah permits us to eat over here. None of them. And the reason for that is the following. I'll read it to you from inside. 1 second. For some reason, I'm not finding it over here. He says, 1 second, guys. Okay, it says like this: Bashratzim lo hitir bahem klum. Regarding crawling animals, which includes the bugs, right, and includes all of these things, lo hitir bahem klum. The Torah permits none of them. Why? I would say because it's something that we're not supposed to be doing. It's disgusting, right? Over here says the Baal HaTurim, bishvil hanachash shehu mehem. Because the nachash, which means the snake, is one of them. In other words, there are certain creatures that crawl on the earth, like what we just said before, hasheretz, hashoretz, ala aretz, one of the crawling creatures of the earth, like we said, like a cockroach or any of these bugs, or any of the things that are listed here. Hacholet v'achbar v'atzab leminehu, which are all types of different animals, a mouse, a toad, a mole, a weasel, different types of lizard, right? All of these things, including bugs, the Torah says none of them are permissible. Why, says the Baal HaTurim? Because they are part of the family of the nachash. Again, not necessarily biologically speaking, but they're included. They're in that category of things that are prohibited rather. Nachash, the snake. Now, this is a very important chidush for us, I think. I wouldn't think that this is why we stay away from bugs, for example. But it's important to understand, we are trying to distance ourselves, says the Baal HaTurim, by not eating any of these foods. We are trying to distance ourselves from the nachash. So every time that you check for a bug in your lettuce or in your cabbage or whatever it is that you're looking for bugs, you have one thing in mind, says the Baal HaTurim. I'm getting rid of anything that resembles the snake from my life. Anything that resembles the snake is out. That's what the Baal HaTurim is telling us. And it's important to realize, what was the significance of the snake? What was the reason that the snake was so bad? So that there are so many things that the snake did wrong. But first of all, the snake caused other people to sin. The snake literally told Chava that nothing will happen to you. Whatever Hashem said, it's because he knows that you'll be able to take over basically if you do this. So therefore, he's telling you not to do this. But the snake was getting other people to sin, to do things that they shouldn't do. That's a very, very terrible thing. So when you cause somebody else to sin, that's the first thing that the snake did, which is terrible. We're trying to say, we don't want to be like the snake. We don't want to cause anybody to sin. God forbid, if somebody is sitting in the Bet HaKnesset and you sit and you start to strike up a conversation with him during Kaddish, God forbid, or doing the services, that's a very serious thing. We can't do that, God forbid. Right? You're causing him to sin. You're causing this guy to talk in the middle of Dam. It's a very big deal. You can't do that. Right? If you cause somebody to go see something that he shouldn't see, you're causing him to sin. Chas v'shalom, it's a terrible thing. Right? So therefore, we're saying, when we look for bugs and we say, we don't want to eat these bugs, we don't tolerate bugs, right? Or any of the non-kosher things that crawl on the earth. What we're saying is, we don't want to be like the snake. What else did the snake do? The snake spoke lashon hara about Hashem, right? The snake was saying, Hashem doesn't want you to be good and to be powerful. Hashem wants you to suffer and be under his dominion, right? So the snake was speaking lashon hara. So we have to realize, we can't do that. We can never speak lashon hara about somebody, right? We can't say to somebody, how come, we never see your wife around, right? Well, where is she all the time? Are you causing people to have shalom bayit problems? God forbid. You're speaking lashon hara. And by the way, if there's one thing the snake did that was really like that, he caused the ultimate shalom bayit problem. He got Adam and Chava divorced for 130 years. After what happened, he caused Adam to leave Chava for 130 years. So the snake is somebody who causes shalom bayit problems. He causes all kinds of problems. Lashon hara causes terrible damage. So when we stay away from these foods, the Baal HaTurim teaches us, we are saying we don't want to be like the snake. We don't want to be like that nachash. So none of those crawling creatures are permitted, says the Baal HaTurim, not even one. None of them. Because they are similar to the snake that crawls very low to the ground, on the ground. We don't want that. We don't want to have any part of that. That's important to do. A lot of times people get into marriages and people from the outside interfere with their marriage. That's a snake. You're interfering with somebody's personal marriage. God forbid. That's exactly what the snake is doing. So this is a message to all of us. Now, if you look, furthermore, you'll see that there are 8 shratzim, while we're on the subject of the sheretz. So we just quoted this pasuk, hasheretz hashoretz al haaretz. So there are 8 of them that when the Torah mentions their names, so we know that their dead bodies will create impurity. So hacholed ve'achbar ve'atzav leminehu, all these animals, the mole, the mouse, some say it's a turtle, some say it's a toad, anaka, right? All the lizard, and all these different animals that we're talking about over here. When they die, there are 8 of them that when they die, so they make impurity. So we just got finished with a whole big ordeal about the snake. There's an interesting question. Rabbi Bachya asks an interesting question. We want to stay away from the snake so badly. The snake is such an impure thing. How come one of the things that's on the list, why isn't it the snake? Why isn't a snake, a dead snake, why does it not create impurity? So he says a very interesting practical answer. He says, because if you were to kill a snake, you would become impure. Again, a snake is, God forbid, trying to attack a person. We don't need the person thinking twice about whether or not to kill the snake, because he knows that if he kills the snake, now he can't show up to his cousin's Thanksgiving sacrifice because he's impure now since he killed the snake. Rabbi Bachya says a very practical answer. We want people to feel perfectly comfortable killing the snake, or scorpion for that matter, that could kill somebody, so that if he kills it, he's not going, oh man, I just killed a snake. Now I'm stuck and I can't go to the Bet HaMikdash today because I'm impure now, or I just killed a scorpion, I'm impure. No, these things Hashem specifically did not make their dead bodies impure, so that you would feel totally comfortable and confident to kill them without any rethinking it, right? With just doing it and feeling totally comfortable that you can do that. Okay. Now, very interesting pasuk that the Torah specifically says in this parasha, missing a letter. So it says over here, Al tishaktu et nafshotechem, on the subject of all of these things. Do not, and by the way, before I even move on to that, just 2 lines before this pasuk, it says, Kol holech al gachon, any animal that goes on its belly, which all the Mefarshim tell us refer to a snake. And you'll notice that the vav of the word gachon, which means snake, is large. If you look in the Sefer Torah, that vav is almost as big as a nun sofit. And the question is why? So over here says the Gemara in Kiddushin, the reason for that is because this vav is the exact middle of the Torah in all of the letters. So if you were to count up all the letters of the Torah, the middlemost letter, central, smack in the middle of the Torah, is the vav of the word gachon. Gachon means snake. And it's just a peculiar thing to think about, as we've been talking so much about this snake. The Torah starts off with the snake, and the middle of the Torah is the snake as well. And it seems to be quite fitting to remind us that that snake is always there and is always trying to attack us and always trying to get us. Don't let go of it. Don't forget about the fact that he is there and trying to hurt us, harm us, and do bad to us. Remember, we don't want to have anything to do with that snake or to be like that snake in any way, God forbid. So you'll notice that in the Sefer Torah and the Chumashim, they pointed out too, the Vav is large because that's the middle of the Torah in letters. Okay. Going down to Psukim, the Torah says, do not make yourselves disgusting. Al tishaktu et nafshotechem bechol hasheretz hashoretz, with all of these creeping, crawling creatures. Velo titameu bahem, and do not become impure through them. Venitmetem bam, and you will become impure through them, through eating them. You will notice that the word venitmetem is missing an aleph. Venitmetem should have been written, as you know, the word tamet, het mem aleph, right? The aleph should have been there, just like 2 words before the aleph is there, right? The aleph is missing. So famously, the Gemara tells us that the reason that this word is missing an aleph is because it's trying to tell you, al tikre venitmetem ela venitamtem, which means you will become blocked, sealed, closed up, which means the following. When a person eats something that's not kosher, unfortunately for that person, in the same way that, God forbid, if a person consumes something that is spoiled or rotten, he didn't mean to, but it causes terrible pain and agony inside of his belly and his stomach. God forbid if he consumes a poison that could kill the guy, right? Again, irrelevant to whether or not he had it on purpose or didn't have it on purpose. It's just a reality. This will harm his stomach, or this could potentially kill him, right? So the thing over here is the Torah is telling us that when it's venitmetem, which means when a person becomes impure through these things, really what's happening to him is venitamtem. Venitamtem means he now has, unfortunately, a spiritual blockage. There's blockage in his neshama. There's a channel that sends kedusha to him and a connection from Hashem to him, and that channel now is experiencing blockage because of the food that he ate. So v'nitamtem is another words of saying he's stuffed up, he's blocked, he is in a state where he's not receiving certain things that his neshama needs in order to properly function, which is a very scary and sad reality that the Gemara is including us in, that this is what happens when a person eats not kosher. You see, a lot of times people have a certain attitude towards food establishments and supermarkets, and they say, look, these guys are under whatever hechsher, right? So what's the big deal if I eat something that is not kosher from this place? Whoever was in charge of making sure that it's kosher and failed at his job, he's the guy that's going to get the punishment. The answer is, yeah, of course he's going to get punished because he was negligent in his job. But the sad reality that the Torah is telling us now is, but you consume not kosher. And that has an immediate effect on you. I once had a conversation with an Adam Gadol in Israel. And as you know, every person every person, the Chovot HaLevavot writes, is supposed to work on faith, work on his own personal faith, and try and grow in his own personal faith, and make it real and establish it and make it rock solid. And that requires a certain amount of philosophical search and looking through things that you're supposed to do, that to solidify your emunah in Hashem. That's a process that a person should go through. But sometimes a person has doubts, and he has, different questions and thoughts and feelings that he's thinking about. And sometimes he doesn't know why he has those doubts. He doesn't know what is going through his head. So this Adam Gadol told me about a Rambam. He told me he never saw it inside, but he heard about a statement from the Rambam. And the Rambam said that a person who experiences such doubts should check to make sure that his food is kosher. Because when a person consumes not kosher food, like we've been saying, he has a certain spiritual blockage that is preventing him from being able to properly understand and have faith in Hashem. So subsequently, I heard about this Rambam in more detail. And the Rambam was actually asked a question about Tchiyat HaMetim, which means the resurrection of the dead, from the people of a community that have been an established community for hundreds, if not already more than hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, at that time already, wherever they were. They were asking, how do we know that Tchiyat HaMetim, that the dead will eventually be resurrected? And the Rambam responded to them about this particular faith, it happens to be one of the tenets of our faith. We say it 3 times a day, that Hashem is Mechayeh Metim Berachamim Rabim. Every day in Shemona Esrei, 3 times we mention the resurrection of the dead. We believe in that wholeheartedly, that eventually that will take place. So the Rambam said that if you are in doubt, and this is something that we've been believing for so many years, for thousands of years, if you find yourselves in doubt about this subject, some of you must not be eating kosher. That's what he told them. And what he said is, I have a proof that this is the case. Now, this is a very interesting proof that the Rambam brings. The Rambam says, the proof is the following. The Gemara in Masechet Megillah asks a question. Haman mina Torah minayin. The Gemara says, we know that everything and everybody is mentioned in the Torah. The Torah is eternal and foresaw the whole rest of time. So where in the Torah can you find the name of Haman? Haman, of course, is the Rasha that wanted to kill all the Jewish people in the story of Purim. So the Gemara wants to know, where is he found in the Torah? So the Gemara answers, it says in Parashat Bereshit, Hamin ha'etz asher tziviticha levilti achol mimenu achalta. Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? Now the word hamin is a question. Did you from, right? Is it so that from the tree, right? Ha min. Is it true that min, from right? Ha'etz, the tree, you ate. So Ha-min is the same letters as Ha-man. So therefore you see Haman. Now, obviously, you have a question, which is why is it that the Torah would mention Haman over here? And everybody says a very interesting answer, which it's a famous answer, that Haman and Adam Arishon were very similar. Adam Arishon was able to eat from any tree in the entire Garden of Eden. He could have anything that he wanted. The whole world belonged to him and his wife, and he had everything. So there was one thing he did not have, and that was the Etz Hadat. And since he didn't have that one thing, it's as if he had nothing. Because unless I have it, I've got nothing. If you can limit me in one area, that means you're on top of me and I'm not God. And that is something that he didn't like, and therefore he ate it, and therefore that is a bad thing. What's the connection to Haman? Haman had everything: wealth, money, power, second in command. I mean, this is the VIP of VIP people in the land of 127 countries, and you can do whatever you want. But there's one Jewish guy that's not bowing down to you, and you're all upset, right? So you're very much like Adam Arishon. That seems to be the connection between the two. Says the Rambam, you want to know what the pshat in this Gemara is? He says a totally, totally, totally different pshat. Amazing. Says the Rambam, the Gemara is asking a different question. The Gemara is asking, how could someone ever have the most ridiculous thoughts like Haman, opinions and thoughts and actions that he did, and the man is paying money out of his pocket to go and kill the Jewish people, so much money. Where does he get these crazy ideas from? How does somebody become like this? So answers the Rambam, because the first mitzvah that Adam was given was what's kosher and what's not kosher. All the fruits of all the trees are kosher. This fruit is not kosher. You're not allowed to eat it. So over here answers the Gemara. You want to know how somebody could become a Haman? You want to know how somebody could come up with these crazy ideas and do the most absurd things? He ate not kosher. That's how you have ridiculous, nonsensical ideas. That's how you get it, because you ate not kosher. Again, same idea. There's a spiritual blockage that comes to a person by eating not kosher. It immediately affects his spirituality, his ability to receive spirituality. It immediately has a terrible effect on him. And therefore, he comes up with crazy questions, like the question that you're asking me, says the Rambam. Is there Tchiyat HaMetim? You know there's Tchiyat HaMetim. Your fathers have been saying it for decades, centuries. Your grandparents have been saying it for decades and centuries. You know the truth. How come you have this question? The answer is somebody by you is eating not kosher. So I was very happy when I heard this, because this confirmed what this Adam Gadol had told me, that the Rambam directly relates the idea that when a person eats kosher, it helps his spirituality, and when a person eats not kosher, it immediately damages his spirituality. And the truth of the matter is that we see in the foods that the Torah allows us to eat, that the Torah allows us to eat only animals that are not predators. The Torah doesn't let us eat any kind of bird that's a predator, right? Any kind of bird that has that kind of claw that it can attack with, right? And attack another animal and hunt it, right? We can't eat those, because the Torah is telling us that there are certain things that will affect our capabilities spiritually. It'll change who we are. It'll affect our neshamot. We have to have things that are humble, things that are non-predators, and that will keep our neshamot pure. It's a quite a fascinating thing, that in a sense we are what we eat. What we eat has a strong effect on our well-being spiritually, and if we are not careful, it can have a very profound negative effect on all of us. Okay, so we'll just end with one more thought, and that is the thought that the Netziv tells us, which is, if you look at the death of Aaron, of the sons of Aaron in the Parashat, you'll notice that many, many, many times the Torah points out that they died because of they died before Hashem. So let's just look at this one last point over here. And the Netziv tells us that there's a very important reason for that. The reason for that is because when a person does something that is wrong, it's one thing. But to do something that's wrong in the presence of Hashem, meaning in the palace of Hashem, where you are right in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a much more intense way than anywhere else, that is a very, very grave sin. Person has to be very careful when he's in a place that is quote unquote lifnei Hashem, right? Let's read it inside. Vatetzeh esh milifnei Hashem. So it says the fire went from before Hashem, right? Vayikhu bnei Aaron alav avihu ish magdado vayidu manesh, right? It says and vayakrivu lifnei Hashem. They brought before Hashem, and then the fire went out before Hashem, and they died before Hashem. Look at how many times the Torah says before Hashem. But there's a reason for that. The reason is because when you stand in a place where you are quote unquote before Hashem, in the presence of Hashem, that is a serious, serious moment. You can't be lightheaded. You can't joke around in that time, because what's happening is you're standing in front of Hashem. So it's one thing if you mess up somewhere else, but to mess up while you're in the presence of a high concentration of holiness, in the presence of Hashem, where you have to be on your game. You cannot allow yourself to slip in such moments, because everything depends on you in this moment, how you conduct yourself in this location, which is such a holy location. So if you mess up, it's a bad thing. And that's why Hashem could not allow for that to be put under the rug, swept under the rug. It has to be addressed immediately, and therefore they were killed on the spot. There was a certain way that Hashem killed them, through their nostrils, two kind of beams that shot down and split up into two each into both of their nostrils, and killed them on the spot. They were basically zapped. I mean, it doesn't get any clearer than that. And as a matter of fact, that's something which repeats itself later on in Sefer Bamidbar, at the end of Parashat Bamidbar, when the tribe of Levi was told that they are supposed to go and they are supposed to they are supposed to transport the Aron HaKodesh and transport all of the different vessels of the Mishkan as the Jews travel throughout the desert. So Hashem tells the Kohanim, you have a very important job. Before the Leviim come and take the vessels of the Mishkan, you must assign them what they are going to do. Don't leave it to them, because you know what's going to happen if it's up to them? They're going to have a very long fight in front of the Aron HaKodesh, which is the most holy vessel. Who is going to be the one to carry the Aron HaKodesh? And there's no way that they are allowed to bicker and fight and quarrel in front of the Aron HaKodesh. They cannot do that, because if they do, they will die. Again, similar idea, Lifnei Hashem, they're in front of Hashem, in front of Aron HaKodesh. You can't behave in front of Aron HaKodesh the way that you would elsewhere. It's just not acceptable. That's the thing. And if you don't know that you can't cross that line, then unfortunately, it doesn't matter anymore. Hashem will have to zap this person, just like he did Nadav ve'Avihu. And that's a scary thought. So Hashem says to them, let's plan ahead of time. Kohanim, before they get to their location and what they do, assign them their jobs. You tell them where to go, not they decide. You tell them where to go. Why? Because that way there will be no room for any bickering or fighting. You can't allow them to fight in front of the Aron HaKodesh. That's not allowed. If they do, they will die, because it's not an ordinary place. It's in front of the Aron HaKodesh. They have to conduct themselves properly. And obviously, that's something that we have to remember when we are lifnei Hashem, when we are in front of Hashem, when we find ourselves in positions and places where we go to pray, where we go to learn. We have to realize at that time that this is not an ordinary setting. This is not a place where a person can do what he wants. He is lifnei Hashem. And obviously, it's different than the real Bet HaMikdash. That's why we call it Mikdash Me'at. It's a miniature, smaller version of Bet HaMikdash. That's what a shul is. But nevertheless, it is definitely a different place than outside in the street. It's a different place than in your own home. It's a Bet HaKnesset. That's the most that we have in quote unquote Lifnei Hashem, in front of Hashem today. And we also have an Aron Kodesh that holds Sifrei Torah. And that's why it's so important that a person should think 20 times before he speaks in a Bet HaKnesset and ask himself, am I allowed to speak this conversation right now? Is this something that I'm allowed to do? Or is this interrupting the prayer? Or is it interrupting other people who are davening? Or is it interrupting somebody who's saying Kaddish? Is what my conversation, what I want to say right now, is that something that I can say Lifnei Hashem, in front of Hashem right now in this holy place, or not? I have to think about that, because if I don't, it's a very, very grave sin. I have to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. And of course, a person can say as much as he wants to Hashem, davening to Hashem. That you can speak as much as you want. But when a person is engaging in chit-chat about this and about that, things that are totally not important and not relevant to the shul, that a person really has to work on and try to improve. And that way, he'll make Hashem happy, because he'll show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he understands he's not in a regular, normal place. He's Lifnei Hashem. He's in a place where it's in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore he behaves appropriately, just like we're learning from Nadav and Avihu. It says, when Tzaddikim die, their death atones for us. And the Mefarshim explain that it's not a miraculous thing, but rather when you learn from their deeds, when you understand from how they behaved, how we should behave, that actually is an elevation for their souls, because we learn from the things that they did. So even though they wanted to do something so holy and pure, and we learned that even their neshamot are even higher than Moshe and Aaron, but to a certain extent, they acted in a way that they shouldn't have in front of Hashem. And therefore, we're learning for ourselves that when we stand in front of Hashem, we also have to behave appropriately and to do the best that we can to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu we realize we're not in any ordinary place, but rather we're in front of you, and we have to respect that. Guys, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining me. We're going to stop over here, continuing next week, Bli Neder. Batzlacha, guys. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.